NVIDIA CEO Jensen Huang has just dropped a rather juicy interview on CNBC. This is not one to miss. Check this out.
The only regret I have about XAI, we're an investor already. The only regret I have is I didn't give him more money. Almost everything that Elon's part of, you really want to be part of as well. And he gave us the opportunity to invest in XAI. I'm just delighted by that. And so it's an investment into a really great future company, and I'm really excited about that. That's not vendor financing per se. But what's going on in the world versus what happened in 2000 is just dramatically different. Back then, as you recall, there were pets.com, hospitals.com, and all of the internet companies combined was, $30-40 billion in size? If you look at the hyperscalers now, that's where the first tranche of AI infrastructure is building. If you look at the AI hyperscalers, that's about $2.5 trillion of business that's already operating today. That business, that $2.5 trillion business, and the CapEx that goes underneath that is about $500 billion. That transition from a classical CPU-based computing to now generative AI computing powered by GPUs, that transition is just starting. So we've got to build into $500 billion worth of capacity infrastructure that's already naturally growing by itself. And we're in the beginning phases of that. If you just look at NVIDIA's AI infrastructure business, call it a couple of $100 billion so far, we're a couple of $100 billion into a multi-trillion dollar build out. So that's number one. The second part of it that's really unique is that we have a new generation of AI companies. The new AI companies like OpenAI and Anthropic and XAI and companies that are, Thinking Machine Labs from Mira and Ilya Sutskever's SSI. There's a whole bunch of amazing AI model builders now. This generation of AI model builders, what's happened in the last several months, a transition happened that is really, really important. For the last several years, they've been generating tokens, these AI tokens, basically at a loss. And the reason for that is because the early AI models really captivated a lot of attention, but they weren't useful enough to pay for. The last several months, it's been very clear that the new technology is now reasoning, it's doing research. Before it answers a question, it goes on the web and studies other PDFs and websites. It can now use tools, generate information for you, and it creates responses that are really useful. I use it every day, to the point where now the tokens are profitable.
The question, though, is who is going to continue to pay for that build-out? Is it the big companies like Procter & Gamble? Is it consumers who are going to do this? I mean, my doctor showed me the AI that he's using, and it's incredibly helpful, but there's still a question about whether he's going to pay for it or the company he works for is going to pay for it.
Well, hopefully both. I think the consumer part of it, a lot of OpenAI customers are consumers, and they're paying for it. But the thing that's really cool is that the enterprise AI build-out that's happening now, my favorite enterprise AI service is Cursor. Cursor is an AI coder. And every one of our engineers, 100%, is now assisted by AI coders. And our productivity has gone up incredibly. And so you're now seeing enterprise AI companies like Cursor, Open Evidence. All of these companies are some of the fastest growing companies in the world, and they address enterprise. And so enterprise AI is here.
I wonder how you think about, Jensen, the ultimate destination where all this is actually building toward. There was a post from David Connie, who's a Sequoia partner, this week saying, look, AGI is the only thing that can justify the volumes of capital spending right now, artificial general intelligence. At the same time, many of the model builders and experts are pushing out the date where that maybe is going to be achievable. How fast do they depreciate? We're putting all this capital in these data centers that it's just not clear when we get to the end, or is it just a treadmill?
We are going to have incredibly profitable and incredibly useful AIs long before AGI. And for example, right now, Cursor AI. Cursor's AI software coder is incredibly useful. All of our engineers use it. We have some 40,000 engineers. Almost every one of them are going to use it, and they're loving it. And so
they're using it instead of something else, presumably, right? So these are displacing things.
Yeah, they're not. This is a brand new thing.
Yeah.
Remember, AI, unlike previous technologies are tools that humans use. Excel is a tool that humans use. A web browser, it's a tool that humans use. For the very first time, we have technology that can actually use tools by itself. And so Cursor uses, Visual C++, and now we have Gemini agents that are able to use the browser and browse for groceries or destinations or book travel for you, and it can use tools by itself. So this is really quite an extraordinary thing. This tool industry is a few $1 trillion. Tool user industry is $100 trillion, which is the reason why everybody's so excited about the future of technology, because it could augment labor, it can increase the productivity of labor, and here at NVIDIA, it's increased our productivity tremendously.
You've already said you wish you could have bought more OpenAI and maybe invested more in XAI at this point. That implies that you don't think that this is all redundant. Because a lot of the players, if I read what Sam Altman says and the message he tries to convey, it's as if they're sprinting to try to stay ahead of everybody else because they think it's not going to be room for everybody necessarily who's trying to do something similar.
I think there's general intelligence, and I think there's specialized intelligence.
Yeah.
We love when I hire engineers, I like them to be generally intelligent, and that's a great thing. But once they come to NVIDIA, we make them highly specialized intelligent so that they could build things that NVIDIA needs. And so I think the idea of specialized intelligence versus generalized intelligence will continue to happen. And where the real value for enterprises and companies is specialized intelligence. And where the value for consumers, general intelligence.
Hey, Jensen, let's talk a little bit about capital allocation and how you see that. Just back to those same points, that you wish you had more invested in OpenAI, you wish you had more invested in these other companies that you're kind of taking stakes in, like an XAI. You can do things with your money. You can choose to put it back into R&D. You probably don't need a ton with that right now. You can choose to build the company. You can choose to make acquisitions. You can choose to give shareholders back big dividends, or you can invest it yourself in other companies. And lately, what we've seen is a lot of investing in other companies. Do you have other deals like that planned in the works?
We're always looking for great startups to invest in. One of my favorite ones was CoreWeave. My only regret is I didn't invest
Add that to the list.
enough. Yeah. And so in all of these investments that we've made recently, we've made some really terrific investments. And largely my only regret is that we didn't invest more, because these are really special companies and they're part of our ecosystem building out the AI infrastructure for the world. And AI is several things. AI is energy, AI is chips, the models, and the applications. And so you could see NVIDIA and you could look at me working across that entire stack of ecosystems around the world. We need more energy, we need more chips, better models, and we need a lot more applications.
Hans, I want to take you on a little segue first. Here we have NVIDIA making yet another investment into an AI company. Berkshire Hathaway once made it to the 6th largest company in the world, and under the influence of Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger, they spent decades buying and selling businesses, which was pretty successful and led to some very significant returns in Berkshire Hathaway stock. What do you make of Jensen's strategic investments? It looks like he's taking a share in almost every single notable AI company. Are we seeing a Berkshire Hathaway 2.0?
Well, that's a great and very thought-provoking question. And I think there's kind of a lot going on here with NVIDIA and what Jensen is trying to do. And in that, there are both some similarities and some key differences between NVIDIA and Berkshire Hathaway. The first, obviously, being that NVIDIA is already the largest company by market cap in the entire world. And it's actually at this point that Jensen is starting to deploy capital aggressively outside of his own company. And clearly, this is a distinctly different strategy than anything that Charlie Munger or Warren Buffett pursued during their career, as they were purely investors. And while they were allocating capital to different businesses and they were advising many businesses, they weren't necessarily entrepreneurs who were building these businesses from the ground up themselves. Whereas Jensen is the founder and CEO of NVIDIA, and he has built this company up from nothing over the past 30 years. But because Jensen has been so successful and he's turned NVIDIA into one of the best companies of all time, it has recently become a cash printing machine that is throwing off so much free cash flow that he has to figure out exactly how to deploy that. And that is where we've seen him turn his attention to making all of these external investments into other AI companies here over the recent months and years. And I think one way to describe Jensen's strategy is actually a mixture of Berkshire Hathaway's focus on value and high-quality businesses combined with Steve Jobs' focus on building ecosystems, which is also something that I think Jensen learned from Morris Chang, the founder of TSMC, who has himself developed an incredible ecosystem business that has taken over chip fabrication around the world. So for Warren and Charlie at Berkshire Hathaway, their approach to actually building up this portfolio of incredibly valuable businesses that compounded over long periods of time was focused on finding durable, high quality businesses that had staying power in the market that they could actually purchase on sale during market downturns. And this value investing framework was something that worked phenomenally well over the course of many years, many markets, many cycles, many booms, and many busts. But the one sector of the economy that this strategy was never really suited to was technology. And that's one of the reasons why Warren and Charlie stayed out of tech investments famously for many years, with the exceptions of companies like Apple that they didn't invest in until much, much later in their life cycle. And while there were some ways that this strategy benefited from economies of scale over the years, it also became much more difficult to sustain high levels of growth when they needed to deploy such large amounts of capital. So the Berkshire Hathaway portfolio didn't necessarily benefit from the same type of network effects advantages that you actually see in many sectors of the technology market. And this is a key difference that Jensen understands completely and factors into the investments that he is making, which if you'll listen closely to Jensen, you'll realize are all part of an explicit strategy to build out a broader ecosystem of tools and resources that really helps to accelerate this transition of technology towards AI workloads that really solve entirely new problems for humanity that we've never been able to bring into the realm of computing before. And so he's really trying to do two things. He's trying to expand the TAM of problems that can be solved by computing. And then he's trying to incubate a network of communities, developers, companies, and efforts to then begin applying this new form of AI computing to actually solve those problems in practice for real customers. So in many ways, what Jensen is building here is actually a lot more like the iPhone and iOS app ecosystem that Steve Jobs created in the 2010s than it is comparable to a Berkshire Hathaway investment portfolio. And there at the very end of the video, we actually heard him talk explicitly about what the 4 different components of this whole ecosystem are. There was the energy, then the chips, which are the focus of his company, and then the models, and on top of that, the applications. And so he said he's planning to invest in every single one of those 4 components of this ecosystem in the coming years so that as a society, we can work through all of the bottlenecks that hold us back from being able to solve some of the world's most challenging problems with AI. But with that said, Jensen is also somewhat conservative with his investments. And so even though you hear him saying in this interview that he wishes that he had invested more money in each of these companies, whether it be OpenAI or XAI, or I think maybe even Cursor was another one that he mentioned investing in reality, he doesn't want to overcapitalize these businesses and allow them to have too much money sloshing around that would make them inefficient, undisciplined, or potentially sloppy with their business. And this is something that you can actually hear from Jensen when he's talking about the investment that they're making of up to $100 billion in OpenAI, but he's breaking that up into $10 billion increments that are really dependent upon performance. And every time he gives Sam $10 billion worth of capital to build out another gigawatt worth of computing, Sam then also has to go raise another $40 to $50 billion from other sources in order to facilitate all of the rest of the build out that goes into that 1 gigawatt. So Jensen doesn't want to be the sole provider of capital for these projects. He wants there to be other pressure, other investors, and other forcing functions for OpenAI to stay lean and to be able to execute effectively. And I think this investing philosophy is something that also carries over into investments into all of these other companies. So while he is explicitly trying to seed this market and this ecosystem and really try to cultivate a robust ecosystem that can solve really big problems, he doesn't want to be so indiscriminate with his capital that he then actually creates challenges, which is a dynamic that you do see commonly play out with investments from companies like SoftBank, who will just completely overcapitalize sectors or businesses and create a lot of destruction in their wake. And then lastly, as the largest company in the world, I'm sure there's also a lot of antitrust regulatory scrutiny that could be put on him. And so these smaller investments that get spread around and are really meant to prop up an entire ecosystem have a lot lower risk from a regulatory standpoint as well. And so now that we've seen investments by Jensen into companies like CoreWeave at the infrastructure level, XAI and OpenAI at the model level, the next things to look for are going to be announcements in those vertical applications, potentially companies like Cursor, as well as direct investments or offtake agreements with power generation companies or public utilities. And the last thing that I want to say on this point is that I do expect to see continued investments by NVIDIA into both XAI and OpenAI, as these are the two main contenders that are developing frontier models that are not built on Google's custom TPU silicon, or in the case of Anthropic, Amazon's Trainium silicon. Because I believe that Jensen has a vested interest in making sure that at least one or two of the frontier models that really have the highest levels of capability need to have been built and trained within NVIDIA's ecosystem, which will help to keep him incentivized in continuing to fund their product roadmap and infrastructure development.
Now, I think Jensen just made a really big comment which fully went under the radar of the CNBC hosts. Jensen said that he thinks the real value for companies will come in the form of specialized intelligence and not generalized intelligence. Hans, everyone's been raging about AGI for the past few years now. What does Jensen mean by specialized intelligence, and are there any budding examples of this playing out in the real world today?
Well, absolutely. When Jensen is talking about specialized intelligence, he's talking about what some researchers have called artificial narrow intelligence, which is basically all of the AI systems that we have built in the past that were really, really good at one thing, but they didn't really do other things well at all. And so this would be things like when Google's DeepMind team actually wrote the AlphaGo system that learned to play Go better than any human player. This was a specialized AI system that was really, really good at playing Go, but then you couldn't actually drop it into, say, a chess match and have it understand how to play that at all, much less be very good at it. And so these narrow forms of intelligence that can be really good at one specific skill or task or job is what I believe Jensen is referring to here. And so, of course, we would like these forms of specialized artificial intelligence to be a little bit more robust, to be a little bit more valuable, to be able to do more useful things to us, but we can do that without making them fully general. And one way to think about that is that this is actually what most individual jobs or even companies actually do. You don't necessarily go to a convenience store to have your computer fixed, and you wouldn't necessarily go to a tire shop to get groceries. So just about any business that you can think of is actually an organization of intelligence that's focused on trying to solve one specific goal for its users or its customers. And this is its own form of specialized intelligence. Now, of course, this is a form of specialized intelligence that's already built on top of humanity's form of general intelligence. And this is one of the big opportunities that really lies ahead for AI. So this is actually one of the reasons that Palantir has been on such a tear recently. They're able to provide companies with frameworks and tools and processes that actually take the outputs of these AI models and turn them into reliable and valuable specialized forms of intelligence that empower the business to get a lot more work done with less energy or less time or less waste or a combination of all three. And so this ability to apply the outputs of these AI models to solve business problems in reliable ways, repeatable ways, where you have high quality and high consistency is what Jensen Huang is talking about when he says that there's so much opportunity on the table for these specialized intelligences. And of course, the example that he chose was Cursor, which, for those of you who don't know, is actually a tool for software programmers to allow AI to do the initial stage of writing code for them, and then helps them to take that code, evaluate it, understand it, debug it, and then integrate it into functional code bases for products and services that customers might actually use. And code generation is the only thing that Cursor does. It's not an AI tool that is a chatbot or does any other types of things that you see AI being used for today. And because they're able to focus on this coding use case, they're able to rapidly improve the quality of the product, and it's consistently getting better and faster at writing higher quality code every few months. So this is another great example of a specialized job for a specialized intelligence that's very valuable. And so by focusing on this use case, Cursor is able to actually create and capture a ton of value that then helps to further accelerate gains in other areas for AI. And as long as we have areas of the economy where we can actually drop artificial intelligence in and generate new value, where we can actually create new users and new consumption in areas where there was no consumption before, then these investments that we're seeing into the AI infrastructure ecosystem will actually create a return on investment that will help to fund the expansion of AI into new horizontal and vertical use cases that will change the world as we know it. Before we wrap, I have to say a huge thank you to my co-host, David. Besides being a great co-host with a great accent, David has been one of the key figures behind the scenes helping me to grow this channel from 1,000 to over 16,000 subscribers, and to put out regular shows that reach millions of views every year. When he's not moonlighting with me, he usually works with businesses who want to leverage YouTube to grow their online presence, and he's looking to take on more. If you want to get more clients and more brand awareness for your business using YouTube, I definitely recommend him. You can book a free call with him using the link in the description below.